The lecture hall was quiet. 30 laptops glowed in the dim room. Professor Caldwell paced slowly in front of the screen. His shoes tapped the tile. "Engineering," he said, "is not for everyone." Students typed. No one looked up. Then Caldwell stopped walking. His eyes landed on Aisha Thompson. "Miss Thompson." Aisha froze. "Yes, Professor?" Caldwell folded his arms. "You looked confused during the algorithm lecture." A few students turned in their chairs. Aisha straightened. "I understood the assignment." Caldwell tilted his head. "Did you?" His voice stayed calm. Too calm. "Because this field requires mental endurance." Someone in the back chuckled. Caldwell didn't smile. "Some students," he continued, "simply aren't built for the pressure." His eyes never left Aisha. A tight silence filled the room. Aisha felt every stare. Her chest tightened. "Are you saying I can't do the work?" she asked quietly. Caldwell shrugged. "I'm saying you should consider whether you belong here." The words hung in the air. "Cold. Sharp." One student whispered. Another looked down. Aisha felt heat rush to her face. But she didn't speak again. She just sat down and opened her laptop. Because Professor Caldwell didn't know something. Something he would learn soon. Something that would shake the entire department. But first, he was about to make things much worse. Aisha barely heard the rest of the lecture. Professor Caldwell kept talking. Equations filled the screen. But the words from earlier still echoed in her mind. "Consider whether you belong here." Her fingers rested on the keyboard. She forced herself to type. "Focus. Just finish the assignment." Around her, the classroom buzzed quietly. Students packed their bags. Someone whispered behind her. Did he really say that to her? "Yeah." "Damn." Aisha kept her eyes on the screen. She refused to turn around. The last line of code finally ran. The program worked. She saved the file. Then closed the laptop. The lecture ended minutes later. Chairs scraped across the floor. Students rushed out. But as Aisha reached the aisle, "Miss Thompson." Her shoulders stiffened. Professor Caldwell stood beside the podium. "Stay for a moment." The room emptied quickly. No one wanted to be there for that conversation. Aisha walked slowly toward the front. "Yes, Professor?" Caldwell adjusted his glasses. "You look distracted today." "I was taking notes." "Were you?" His tone felt sharp. "Because engineering students must keep up with the pace." "I am keeping up." Caldwell studied her face. Then he gave a thin smile. "We'll see." He handed her a printed sheet. "First programming assignment." Aisha glanced at the paper. "Due Friday." "That's 3 days," she said. "Yes." "That's not much time." Caldwell shrugged. "The industry doesn't wait for slow thinkers." Aisha swallowed. "I'll finish it." Caldwell nodded once. "I hope so." His eyes drifted toward the empty classroom. Students who fall behind early rarely recover. Aisha held the paper tighter. "I won't fall behind." Caldwell didn't respond. He simply turned back to his desk. Conversation over. 3 days later, the classroom buzzed with nervous energy. Assignments were graded. Caldwell stood at the front with a stack of papers. "Most of you struggled," he said. Groans filled the room. Aisha sat quietly. Her hands rested on the desk. Caldwell continued. Several submissions showed creative misunderstandings. A few students laughed nervously. Then Caldwell picked up one sheet. But one result surprised me. The room quieted. He clicked the projector. A grading chart appeared. Students leaned forward. Then the top score appeared. Aisha Thompson, 98%. Several heads turned toward her. Someone whispered, "Wait, she got the highest." Aisha felt her stomach tighten. Caldwell stared at the screen, then slowly turned toward her. "Miss Thompson." "Yes." "How did you complete the optimization function?" "I followed the algorithm from the lecture." Caldwell's eyebrow lifted. "Did you?" "Yes." "Explain." The room went silent. Aisha described the steps. "Clear. Precise." Students nodded as she spoke. But Caldwell didn't. He crossed his arms. "Interesting." Aisha felt tension rise in her chest. "Is something wrong?" Caldwell walked closer. Students who struggle during lectures rarely produce near-perfect code. Her heart pounded. "I didn't struggle." "You looked confused." "I was thinking." A small laugh came from the back of the room. Caldwell glanced toward it. Then back at Aisha. "Did someone assist you?" Aisha blinked. No. A tutor perhaps? No. A friend? No. The silence stretched. Aisha felt every pair of eyes watching. Are you accusing me of cheating? She asked. Caldwell tilted his head slightly. I'm asking questions. That sounds like an accusation. A few students shifted uncomfortably. Caldwell leaned against the desk. Engineering demands honesty. I know. Good. He held her gaze. Because students who fake competence usually collapse later. The words landed like a punch. Aisha's hands tightened. I didn't fake anything. Caldwell shrugged. Then time will reveal the truth. He turned back to the podium. Class dismissed. Chairs scraped loudly. Students gathered their things. But whispers filled the air. Did she cheat? I don't know. Why would he say that? Aisha packed her laptop slowly. Her ears burned. As she stood to leave. Miss Thompson. She stopped again. Caldwell's voice dropped lower this time. Almost private. Ambition is admirable, he said. Aisha stared at him. But pushing beyond your natural ability. He paused. Often ends badly. Aisha's chest tightened. Are you warning me? Caldwell gave a faint smile. I'm advising you. He picked up the next stack of papers. Conversation finished. But as Aisha walked out of the classroom, his final words followed her into the hallway. Students who overreach, Caldwell said quietly, usually fail spectacularly. And suddenly, Aisha realized something. This class wasn't just about grades anymore. It had become something else. Something much more dangerous. The next lecture began before Aisha was ready. She walked into the classroom early. Laptop in her arms. Coffee in one hand. Her eyes moved quickly across the room. Some students nodded politely. Others looked away. A few whispered. The rumor had already spread. She cheated. Or worse. The professor thinks she cheated. Neither version helped. Aisha sat near the middle row. Same seat. Same desk. Same quiet determination. She opened her laptop. Daniel slid into the chair beside her. You okay? He asked quietly. Aisha kept typing. I'm fine. Daniel hesitated. People are talking. I know. You want to say something to the class? Aisha shook her head. No. Why not? Because explaining myself won't matter. Daniel leaned back. Maybe not. But silence lets people assume things. Aisha didn't answer. Her screen glowed with lines of code. Focus. That was the only thing she could control. The door opened. Professor Caldwell entered. The room instantly quieted. He placed his briefcase on the desk. Then scanned the class slowly. His eyes stopped on Aisha. Just for a moment. Then he turned to the projector. Today we review recursion algorithms. His voice was calm, professional, but the tension sat beneath every word. The lecture began. Students typed. Caldwell wrote code across the board. Halfway through the explanation he turned suddenly. Miss Thompson. Aisha looked up. Yes. Explain why recursion can cause memory overflow. 30 heads turned again. Aisha answered carefully. Because each function call creates a new stack frame. Caldwell nodded slightly. And if the base condition isn't reached? The calls continue until the stack is full. Good. He paused. Then added quietly. Assuming the programmer actually understands recursion. A few students shifted in their chairs. Aisha felt heat rise in her chest. But she stayed calm. Caldwell continued the lecture. 10 minutes later he stopped again. Miss Thompson. Yes. Come solve this example. He pointed at the board. The problem was long. Complex. Aisha stood. The room watched her walk forward. Chalk dust floated in the air. She read the code. Then started writing. One step. Then another. Her handwriting stayed steady. Behind her she heard someone whisper. Is she going to mess up? Daniel muttered back. Just watch. Aisha finished the function. Then stepped aside. Caldwell studied the board. Long silence. Students waited. Finally he spoke. The logic is correct. Relief flickered through the room. But Caldwell wasn't finished. However, he continued, this solution is inefficient. Aisha frowned slightly. How? Your recursion depth is unnecessary. She pointed to the second line. That prevents it. Caldwell walked closer. His voice dropped. Only if the programmer predicts the edge case. I did. Did you? The tension snapped tight. Students stared at the board. Aisha refused to step back. Yes. Caldwell folded his arms. Then explain why your method fails when input values increase. Aisha blinked. That's not correct. Isn't it? She stepped forward again, adjusted one line, then ran through the logic. Step by step. Silence filled the room. Even Caldwell listened. When she finished, Daniel whispered softly. She just proved him wrong. Caldwell cleared his throat. The example works, he admitted. Then he erased half the board. But engineering is about reliability. Aisha watched him erase her code. Students who barely grasp concepts sometimes produce lucky results. Her stomach dropped. So this is luck. I didn't say that. It sounds like it. A ripple of tension spread through the room. Caldwell turned slowly. Confidence can become arrogance very quickly. Aisha felt every eye watching. I'm explaining my work. And I'm evaluating it. His voice sharpened slightly. That is my job. No one spoke. Even Daniel stayed quiet now. Caldwell turned back to the class. Everyone copy the revised version. Students began typing again. Aisha returned to her seat. Her hands trembled slightly. Daniel leaned closer. That wasn't fair. Aisha whispered back. It's not supposed to be. The lecture ended 30 minutes later. Students packed their bags. But something had changed. The room felt different. Heavier. More watchful. As Aisha stood to leave. Miss Thompson. Caldwell's voice again. Quiet. Sharp. She walked toward the front. Yes, Professor? Caldwell closed his laptop slowly. You're very determined. I work hard. I can see that. His eyes narrowed slightly. But determination can become stubbornness. Aisha didn't respond. Caldwell leaned back in his chair. Engineering programs remove students every semester. I know. Many of them begin exactly where you are. Her chest tightened. Meaning? They believe effort alone guarantees success. I never said that. No, Caldwell said softly. But you behave like someone trying to prove something. Aisha held his gaze. Maybe I am. Caldwell studied her for a long moment. Then he said something that made her stomach twist. Students who fight the curriculum often discover the system fights back. Aisha felt the warning behind the words. That sounds like a threat. Caldwell smiled faintly. Just professional advice. She turned to leave. But his final sentence stopped her in the doorway. Oh, and Miss Thompson. She looked back. Caldwell's voice was almost casual. Next week we begin the midterm project. Aisha waited. The top students will present their work to the entire faculty board. A few remaining students froze. Caldwell continued. And those presentations determine who truly belongs in this department. Aisha's pulse quickened. Caldwell picked up his briefcase. And who doesn't? The door closed behind her. But something about that announcement felt wrong. Very wrong. Because the challenge didn't feel academic anymore. It felt personal. And deep down, Aisha was starting to suspect. Professor Caldwell wanted her to fail. The engineering lab stayed open all night. Aisha liked it that way. Less noise. Less staring. Just rows of computers humming under soft white lights. She sat at the far corner desk. Laptop open. 3 empty coffee cups beside her. Lines of code scrolled down the screen. Her midterm project wasn't simple. It was a disaster evacuation algorithm. A system that could calculate the fastest escape routes during emergencies. Floods. Fires. Earthquakes. The math was brutal. The simulations were worse. But Aisha kept working. Because something inside her had changed. Professor Caldwell didn't just doubt her anymore. He expected her to fail. And she refused to give him that satisfaction. Her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. Daniel, you still in the lab? Aisha, yeah. Daniel, you haven't left since class. Aisha, almost done with the simulation. 3 dots appeared. Then another message. Daniel, wait there. Aisha frowned. 5 minutes later the lab door opened. Daniel walked in carrying a laptop. You're insane, he said. Aisha didn't look up. I'm focused. You've been here 6 hours. 7. Daniel dropped into the chair beside her. You know Caldwell is pushing you, right? Aisha typed faster. I noticed. No. I mean really pushing. She finally turned. What does that mean? Daniel lowered his voice. People are talking. About the cheating thing? About the way he treats you. Aisha leaned back slowly. And? Some think it's messed up. Some. Daniel hesitated. Others think he must have a reason. Aisha gave a tired smile. Of course they do. Daniel watched the screen. You're still working on the evacuation model? Yeah. You're going to present that? That's the plan. Daniel whistled softly. That's ambitious. Aisha raised an eyebrow. You sound like Caldwell. I didn't mean it like that. Then how? Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. Look, he's already watching you. If your project crashes, it won't. You can't guarantee that. Aisha turned back to the keyboard. I can guarantee I'll try. Daniel sighed. You're stubborn. So I've heard. Another voice suddenly spoke from behind them. You're also right. Both of them turned. Maya stood near the lab door. Laptop under her arm. You scared me, Daniel said. Maya shrugged. Sorry. She walked over slowly. I heard the conversation. Aisha blinked. How long were you standing there? Long enough. Daniel frowned. You've been quiet in class all semester. I observe, Maya said calmly. Then she looked at Aisha. And Caldwell observes you. Aisha crossed her arms. I've noticed that too. Maya opened her laptop. Actually, I noticed something else. She turned the screen. A video began playing. The classroom. Caldwell standing at the board. Aisha explaining recursion. Daniel's eyes widened. You recorded that? Maya nodded. Not just that one. Aisha leaned closer. Why? Because the way he talks to you isn't normal. Daniel stared at the screen. Yeah, it's pretty obvious here. Aisha felt her stomach twist. You shouldn't have recorded lectures. Technically the student policy allows it, Maya said calmly. For study purposes. Daniel blinked. You're serious about this? Maya nodded once. Patterns matter. Aisha studied the paused video. Caldwell's voice echoed faintly through the speakers. Students who barely grasp concepts sometimes produce lucky results. Her jaw tightened. You think this proves something? Maya shook her head. Not yet. Then why keep it? Because patterns take time. The lab fell quiet. Computers hummed. Somewhere down the hall a door slammed. Daniel leaned back in his chair. This whole thing feels wrong. Aisha closed the video window. I don't want drama. Maya folded her arms. Too late for that. Aisha looked at her. What do you mean? Maya pointed toward the screen. The department board presentation. Aisha nodded slowly. Yeah, that room will have every professor watching. Daniel added quietly. And Caldwell will be standing right there. Aisha exhaled slowly. I know. Daniel glanced between them. You realize he might try to destroy your project, right? Aisha blinked. How? Public questioning, Maya said. Technical traps. Daniel nodded. Embarrassing you in front of the faculty. Aisha looked back at the code on her screen. Her reflection stared back from the dark glass. Then I'll just have to be ready. Daniel shook his head. You're walking into a fight. Aisha didn't deny it. Maya closed her laptop. You won't be alone. Aisha frowned slightly. What does that mean? Maya gave a small smile. It means some of us are paying attention. Daniel nodded. More than you think. Aisha felt something strange. Not victory. Not relief. But the pressure in her chest loosened just a little. For the first time since Caldwell accused her. She didn't feel completely isolated. But that feeling didn't last long. Because the lab door suddenly opened again. Several engineering students walked in. They stopped when they saw Aisha. Then one of them said something quietly. Careful who you study with. Daniel frowned. What's that supposed to mean? The student shrugged. We heard Caldwell earlier. Aisha's stomach dropped. What did he say? The student looked uncomfortable. Then he repeated the professor's words slowly. He said students who follow the wrong leader. The room fell silent. Usually sync with them. Daniel's jaw tightened. Maya looked at Aisha. And suddenly the message became clear. Professor Caldwell wasn't just targeting her anymore. He was warning everyone else. Stay away from her. Or fall with her. The midterm results were posted on Monday morning. Aisha saw the crowd before she saw the screen. Students packed the hallway outside the engineering office. Voices overlapped. Did you check yours? I heard the averages were brutal. Caldwell failed half the class. Aisha slowed her steps. Her heart beat harder with each step toward the board. Daniel spotted her first. He raised a hand. Aisha. His voice sounded strange. Not worried. Not excited. Just surprised. What happened? She asked. Daniel looked back at the board. You should see it yourself. Students shifted as she stepped closer. Some made space. Others stared. The ranking sheet hung in the center. Department midterm standings. Names and scores lined the page. Aisha's eyes moved down the list. Number 5. Number 4. Number 3. Her stomach tightened. Number 2. Then she saw it. 1. Aisha Thompson. Her breath caught. Daniel leaned toward her. You beat everyone. Whispers spread through the hallway. Wait, she's first. Ow! Didn't Caldwell say she was struggling? Aisha stared at the page. Her score sat higher than the rest. Not by a little. By a lot. She turned to Daniel. These are official? Department rankings, he said. Blind grading. Another student spoke quietly behind them. That means Caldwell didn't choose it. Aisha felt something shift inside her. Not relief. Something sharper. Truth. Because the numbers didn't lie. And Caldwell couldn't hide them. But the hallway suddenly went quiet. Footsteps approached. Heavy. Steady. Professor Caldwell appeared at the end of the corridor. Students quickly stepped aside. He walked through the crowd. His eyes moved across the board. Then stopped at the top name. Aisha watched his expression carefully. No smile. No surprise. Just cold calculation. Caldwell turned slowly. Miss Thompson. The hallway froze. Yes, Professor? Come to my office. No one spoke. Daniel whispered softly. That's not good. Aisha followed Caldwell down the hall. His office door clicked shut behind them. The room smelled like old books and coffee. Caldwell sat behind his desk. He gestured toward the chair. Sit. Aisha sat. Caldwell folded his hands. The department results arrived this morning. I saw them. You're ranked first. Yes. Caldwell studied her face. You seem calm. I worked hard. Yes. His voice stayed neutral. Blind grading sometimes produces unusual outcomes. Aisha frowned slightly. What does that mean? It means the committee evaluates code without context. That's the point. Is it? Aisha felt the tension rising again. Are you saying the ranking is wrong? I'm saying results deserve scrutiny. Aisha leaned forward. My project followed every requirement. Caldwell nodded slowly. Yes. The documentation is impressive. Then what's the problem? Caldwell opened a folder. He slid her project file across the desk. You used an optimization technique. Yes. Where did you learn it? Research papers. Which ones? Aisha listed 3 sources. Caldwell listened quietly. Then he asked another question. And you implemented this alone? Yes. No external assistance? No. Caldwell leaned back in his chair. His eyes narrowed slightly. Ambitious work for a first-year student. Aisha felt the familiar edge in his voice. You asked us to push ourselves. Yes. But pushing too far creates risk. Aisha crossed her arms. My code passed every test. For now. The words landed softly. But they carried weight. Aisha studied his face. What are you implying? Caldwell tapped the folder lightly. Being at the top attracts attention. That's not a bad thing. Sometimes it is. Silence filled the office. Aisha could hear students talking faintly in the hallway. Then Caldwell spoke again. The faculty board will review the top projects next month. I know. They will ask questions. I'm ready. Caldwell gave a thin smile. Confidence is admirable. Aisha waited. Then he added quietly. But fragile. Her stomach tightened. You still think I don't belong here? Caldwell didn't answer immediately. Instead he stood. Walked toward the window. Campus trees swayed outside. Students crossed the courtyard below. Finally he spoke. Universities have standards. I meet them. For now. Aisha felt the anger rising in her chest. I earned that ranking. Caldwell turned back slowly. Yes. His voice stayed calm. But rankings change. How? Pressure. Aisha stood. I can handle pressure. Caldwell stepped closer. You believe that? Their eyes locked. Then Caldwell said something that sent a chill through her. The higher you climb, Miss Thompson. He paused. The harder the fall becomes. The warning hung in the air. Aisha grabbed her folder. I'm not planning to fall. She walked to the door. But Caldwell's final sentence followed her. Soft. Almost casual. You should prepare for the possibility anyway. Aisha stopped. Her hand rested on the door handle. Then she turned slightly. What possibility? Caldwell's eyes stayed cold. That your success. He tapped the folder again. May not survive closer inspection. The words echoed in her mind as she stepped into the hallway. Because something about that conversation felt different. Not doubt. Not criticism. Something else. Something darker. For the first time, Aisha wondered if Professor Caldwell wasn't just questioning her work. He might actually be trying to destroy it. The following week, Aisha arrived at the lab earlier than usual. The room smelled faintly of solder and old textbooks. Computers hummed in soft, steady rhythm. She set her backpack down and opened her laptop. Lines of code scrolled across the screen. Her disaster evacuation simulation had grown more complex. Multiple variables, real-world conditions, dynamic algorithms. Each run taxed the system. Daniel slid into the chair beside her. "You're already here?" he asked. Aisha didn't look up. "I have to get ahead." "You're already first in the class," Daniel said softly. "Is that enough?" "Not if it means surviving Caldwell," she muttered. The door opened quietly. Maya peeked in, holding her laptop. "I've noticed something," she said, closing the door behind her. Aisha turned. "What?" Maya leaned against a desk. "Caldwell isn't just challenging you publicly. He's starting to document everything." "What do you mean?" Aisha asked, heart tightening. "He keeps detailed notes on your work, your questions, even small errors. I think he's preparing a file." Daniel frowned. "To do what?" "Who knows," Maya said. "He's trying to build a narrative, maybe against you." Aisha exhaled slowly. "So he's not questioning my work for teaching purposes?" Maya shook her head. "No. He's targeting you." Aisha's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Her hands trembled slightly. "Why me?" "Because you're proving him wrong," Daniel said bluntly. "Every time you succeed, it's like he loses control." The lab door opened again. A group of students walked in, quietly, trying to avoid attention. "Hey," one whispered. "You're working on the midterm project?" "Yes," Aisha said, typing steadily. "Careful who sees you," another said. "Caldwell warned us about following the wrong leader." Aisha's stomach dropped. "What does that even mean?" "They think you might get others in trouble," Daniel said quietly. Maya opened her laptop. "That's not the worst part. Look at these files." She slid it toward Aisha and Daniel. Aisha scrolled. Screenshots of Caldwell grading patterns, notes about students, even past course records. Some students had been pushed out of advanced labs without explanation. A subtle pattern emerged. "Bias," Daniel muttered. "He's been targeting specific students for years." "Evidence," Maya corrected. "Not just bias. Proof." Aisha felt a cold weight settle in her chest. "So it's not just me. It's systemic." Maya nodded. "Exactly. And the board is going to see your project next month. You need more than just skill. You need strategy." Daniel frowned. "Do you think he'll sabotage your project?" "I have no doubt," Aisha admitted. "He won't admit it openly. He'll try to trip me up in class. Humiliate me in front of the faculty. Maybe even convince other students to avoid helping me." Daniel looked uneasy. "That's a lot to handle." "I know," she said quietly. "But I don't have a choice." Maya leaned forward. "You're not alone. We're documenting everything too. If he tries anything, there's a record." Daniel added, "And we'll support you. Quietly if needed." Aisha nodded slowly, trying to absorb the weight of their support. For the first time, she didn't feel completely isolated, but the pressure remained. Later that day, she walked into the lecture hall. Caldwell was already there. His eyes scanned the room slowly, lingering on Aisha. "Good morning," he said, voice smooth. "I hope everyone is ready for today's session." Aisha took her seat. She felt every stare, every whisper, every judgment. Caldwell pulled up a spreadsheet on the projector. "I've reviewed the preliminary midterm submissions. Some are adequate. Some are ambitious." He paused, eyes narrowing slightly. "Miss Thompson, your progress is notable." Aisha felt her stomach tighten. "Thank you." "Notable," he repeated, voice flat. "But attention can be dangerous." She looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "Careful who you impress," he said softly. "Exceeding expectations can draw scrutiny." The words hung in the air. Not a compliment. Not a warning. Something in between. After class, Aisha lingered in the hallway. Daniel caught up. "He's making this personal," Daniel said. "I know," she said. "Every project, every lecture, it's pressure after pressure." "But you're ready," he said firmly. And you're not alone. Aisha exhaled. I have to hope that's enough. Later, in the lab, Maya showed her a new document. A list of students who had been subtly excluded from opportunities. Names, notes, references to bias and intimidation. Caldwell's tactics were clearer than ever. Aisha studied the files. He's trying to control the narrative before the board even sees my work. Yes, Maya said. And now we know. Daniel leaned back in his chair. So what's the plan? Aisha closed her laptop. We keep working. We document. And when the board sees my project, the truth comes out. Maya nodded. It's risky, but it's the only way. Aisha's fingers hovered over the keyboard once more. She typed steadily, methodically, her mind focused not just on the project, but on surviving Caldwell's scrutiny. Every line of code was a shield. Every algorithm a statement. Every simulation a demonstration that she belonged. Because she realized the stakes were higher than grades. Caldwell wasn't just questioning her work. He was testing whether she could withstand the pressure of a system stacked against her. And she would. But first, she had to be ready for whatever came next. Because the midterm board presentation wasn't just an academic evaluation. It was a battlefield. And she was determined to survive it. The day of the heated classroom confrontation arrived faster than Aisha expected. The lecture hall was full. Students whispered among themselves. Some glanced nervously at Aisha. Others avoided eye contact entirely. Professor Caldwell stood at the front, arms crossed, a faint smirk on his face. Good morning, he said. I hope everyone is prepared for today's discussion on advanced data structures. Aisha sat upright, laptop open. Her notes were organized, simulations ready. She felt the familiar tension building in her chest. Caldwell's eyes scanned the room. Then they landed on her. Miss Thompson, he said smoothly. Yes, Professor? Explain your approach to the graph traversal project. Aisha clicked her laptop to display the results. I used a modified breadth-first search algorithm with weighted nodes to optimize evacuation time. Caldwell leaned on the podium. Did someone assist you? I implemented it myself, she replied. He raised an eyebrow. Interesting. Because I've noticed a sudden improvement in your last 3 submissions. Quite a jump for someone your level. The students shifted in their seats. Some gasped quietly. I've been working hard, Aisha said calmly. Caldwell folded his arms. I'm aware. But effort doesn't always equal understanding. Especially when students are underprepared. Aisha's jaw tightened. I'm prepared. And I can explain any part of this project. Can you? He asked sharply. Because the last time you presented, you failed to account for edge case scenarios. Something that anyone in this class could have caught. Murmurs ran through the lecture hall. A few students exchanged uneasy glances. I have revised all scenarios, Aisha said. Including edge cases. Caldwell stepped closer. Then show me. Aisha projected her full simulation. Graphs, time sequences, optimized routes all laid bare. The code executed flawlessly. Silence. Several students whispered under their breath. Impressive, Caldwell said almost grudgingly. But real-world implementation isn't so forgiving. It's designed for real-world conditions, Aisha replied steadily. Floods, fires, earthquakes, the system adapts. Caldwell smirked. Adaptive systems require more than just algorithms. They require judgment. You seem confident in your judgment. Perhaps too confident. Aisha's hands clenched into fists briefly, then relaxed. She refused to give him the satisfaction of visible frustration. Confidence is backed by results, she said. And these results are verified. He raised an eyebrow. Verified? By whom? By the simulation, she said. And by faculty-reviewed sources I cited. Caldwell's smirk faded slightly. His voice grew sharper. Students who don't understand their limitations often overestimate their competence. Don't mistake this for praise. Aisha's pulse quickened. She felt the pressure of every eye in the room, every whispered doubt. But she didn't step back. She couldn't. Suddenly, a student in the back spoke up. Professor, she's right. Her logic checks out. Another added, yeah, the code works perfectly. Caldwell's expression tightened. Thank you for your input. His tone was clipped. Aisha saw the shift. Students were beginning to question him. Quietly. Subtly. He straightened. Miss Thompson, continue with the project walkthrough. Aisha calmly explained the system step by step, pointing out simulations, adjustments, and fail-safes. Every step exposed her competence. Every step exposed his assumptions. By the end, murmurs had grown louder. Several students leaned forward, taking notes, asking clarifying questions. Caldwell's smirk returned, but tighter, forced. His authority was still there, but it wavered under scrutiny. He clapped his hands once. "Very well. You've made your point for now." Aisha returned to her seat. Her hands shook slightly, adrenaline surging. Daniel leaned over. "That was amazing." Maya whispered. "He just lost ground." Caldwell glanced at them. His cold stare returned, directed at the whole class. "Let this be a lesson. Questioning authority comes with consequences. Some are easier to bear than others." Aisha's stomach tightened. She understood. He was warning not just her, but everyone watching her. After class, whispers spread through the hall. "Did you see how she handled Caldwell? She proved him wrong. He's usually untouchable." Aisha walked out quietly, Daniel and Maya flanking her. Outside, the campus sun felt warm but heavy. She realized something. The confrontation had changed something fundamental in the classroom dynamic. Students who had stayed silent began asking questions. Some even approached her quietly for guidance. Daniel said softly, "They're starting to see the real him." Aisha nodded, though the weight of the confrontation still pressed on her chest. "And now, I have to be ready for the faculty board." Maya added, "Caldwell's not going to stop. He'll push harder. But now others are noticing." Aisha paused. "It's not just about the project anymore. It's about every student who's ever been intimidated." Daniel looked at her seriously. "You're setting an example. But it's dangerous." Aisha exhaled. "I know. But I can't back down." Maya closed her laptop. "Good. Because the final board presentation, that's when the system will really test you." Aisha's mind raced. She thought about Caldwell's warnings, his subtle threats, the whispered cautions of other students. Every step from now on mattered. And somewhere deep inside, she felt a quiet resolve. She wouldn't just survive the confrontation. She would endure it. She would rise through it. And she would make the truth undeniable. Because the breaking point wasn't the end, it was the beginning. The faculty auditorium buzzed with quiet tension. Rows of polished wooden seats gleamed under bright lights. Computers, projectors, and research boards filled the front of the room. Students sat scattered among faculty members. Journalists were invited to observe the top projects. Cameras silently recorded every detail. Aisha stepped into the hall, laptop and project files in hand. Her heart pounded. Daniel and Maya followed closely, flanking her like shadows of support. "This is it," Daniel whispered. "No turning back now." Aisha nodded. "I know." Professor Caldwell was already at the front, reviewing his notes. His expression was calm, too calm. The moderator called the session to order. "Today," he said, "the department will review the top midterm projects. We expect rigorous questioning and detailed presentations." Aisha stepped forward when her name was called. The room seemed to hold its breath. She projected her evacuation model onto the large screen. Graphs, algorithms, simulations, all cleanly displayed. "Good morning," she said clearly, her voice steady despite the nerves in her chest. "My project focuses on optimizing evacuation routes during natural disasters using real-time data and predictive algorithms." Caldwell's eyes narrowed. He was seated near the front, notebook open, pen poised. "Miss Thompson," he said, voice calm but sharp, "your model uses weighted nodes. Can you explain the rationale for choosing these specific weight factors?" Aisha clicked through slides, showing the simulations. Weighted nodes allow the algorithm to prioritize routes based on hazard severity and population density. This ensures evacuation efficiency while minimizing risk. She ran a simulation. The evacuation paths unfolded in real time, showing the system rerouting people around flooded streets, blocked passages, and unstable bridges. Faculty members leaned forward. Some murmured quietly. "Impressive," said one professor. "Your model accounts for dynamic variables effectively." Another asked, "What safeguards exist against data errors?" "I've implemented redundancy checks," Aisha explained. "The system cross-verifies inputs and recalculates paths if inconsistencies are detected. It also flags anomalies for human oversight." Caldwell cleared his throat. "Your simulations are accurate under controlled conditions. How does the system respond to unpredictable events? Aisha ran a live simulation. A sudden bridge collapse appeared in the model. Evacuation routes instantly recalculated. People were rerouted safely to alternative exits. The room was silent. Caldwell's pen hovered over his notebook. Aisha continued, "The algorithm is adaptive. It prioritizes safety and efficiency, even under unexpected conditions. All simulations have been verified with historical disaster data and real-time variables." Several faculty members whispered to each other. One nodded appreciatively. Caldwell's voice cut through the murmurs. "Miss Thompson, this is technically sound, but have you considered the system's scalability for large urban populations?" "Yes," Aisha replied. She projected citywide simulations. The model scales using parallel processing, predictive caching, and hierarchical routing. Even cities with millions of residents can be simulated without performance loss. Caldwell's face remained neutral, but his jaw tightened subtly. A faculty member leaned forward. "Miss Thompson, how does your model improve upon the department's existing benchmark?" Aisha smiled faintly. "It reduces evacuation time by 27% in high-density scenarios. It dynamically adapts to changing hazard conditions, whereas the previous system relied on static routing plans." A murmur spread through the room. Caldwell scribbled something in his notebook, but said nothing. Daniel whispered to Maya, "She's killing it." Maya nodded. "And he knows it." Caldwell finally spoke, voice low. "Miss Thompson, why weren't you recommended for advanced lab programs? Your work clearly exceeds expectations." The room fell silent. Aisha held his gaze. "I was not aware of any recommendation process, but I focused on the project itself. I assume the results speak for themselves." The moderator intervened. "The board will review all top projects equally. Professor Caldwell, please continue your notes after the session." Caldwell gave a thin nod. His calm mask remained, but a flicker of irritation crossed his eyes. Aisha continued presenting. Each slide, each demonstration reinforced the superiority of her project. The faculty asked technical questions, all of which she answered confidently. Every answer exposed her competence and subtly revealed the gaps in Caldwell's prior assessments. Finally, she concluded, "This model demonstrates that adaptive, data-driven approaches can significantly improve disaster response outcomes, saving lives and resources." The room was silent for a heartbeat. Then applause erupted, not loud but steady. Faculty members nodded appreciatively. Some whispered among themselves, clearly impressed. Daniel and Maya exchanged relieved glances. Caldwell sat back, expression tight. His pen clicked against the desk. He didn't speak. But the message was clear. The board had seen everything, and there was no room for doubt about Aisha's abilities. As she packed up, a senior faculty member approached. Quietly, he said, "You've raised the standard, Miss Thompson. Excellent work. And thank you for showing us the full potential of student-led projects." Aisha smiled faintly, swallowing the mix of relief and lingering tension. Behind her, Caldwell collected his notes, his authority intact but challenged. For the first time, his influence over her reputation in the department was no longer absolute. The session ended. Students and faculty filtered out. Cameras turned off. Aisha walked into the sunlight outside the auditorium. Her chest still raced, but the weight on her shoulders felt lighter. Daniel whispered, "You did it." "I did it," Aisha replied softly. Maya added, "And everyone saw it. No one can question your work now." But as she looked back at the building, Aisha knew something important. The fight wasn't over. Caldwell's scrutiny would continue. His influence would linger. Yet one thing was undeniable. Her work could no longer be dismissed. Her voice could no longer be silenced. And the truth, her truth, was finally visible to everyone. The following week, whispers spread faster than wildfire. Students who had once avoided Aisha now lingered near her. Some asked questions quietly. Others just watched, curious, reluctant, hopeful. Professor Caldwell arrived in his office early as usual, but the energy around him had changed. The department chair, Dr. Reynolds, called an unexpected meeting. Aisha received the email mid-morning. All faculty members and selected students are requested in the main conference room at 2 p.m. Attendance is mandatory. Her stomach tightened. Daniel and Maya flanked her as they entered the room. Several faculty members were already seated. Caldwell stood near the back, notebook in hand, expression calm but tight. Dr. Reynolds cleared his throat. We are here today to review departmental conduct and ensure fairness across all programs. Recent concerns have been raised regarding the treatment of students in advanced labs. A hush fell over the room. Caldwell's pen hovered, then clicked sharply on the desk. His gaze flicked to Aisha briefly, then away. Dr. Reynolds continued. It has come to our attention that grading patterns and mentorship practices may have inadvertently created inequities. We are reviewing documentation from faculty and student submissions. Aisha felt her heart hammer. This was it. The system itself was finally watching Caldwell. Maya leaned over. Stay calm. Let them see the facts. Daniel whispered. It's happening. Dr. Reynolds motioned toward a stack of printed files. Miss Thompson, your project and supporting documentation have been reviewed. Faculty members have compiled reports regarding your progress, grades, and the conduct of supervising professors. Caldwell shifted slightly, pen tapping faster. Dr. Reynolds paused. We've also reviewed internal recordings and logs submitted by other students. There is evidence that some faculty behavior has been, at minimum, discouraging to students demonstrating high competence. Caldwell's jaw tightened. He opened his notebook as if to write, but Dr. Reynolds continued. Miss Thompson's case highlights a discrepancy. Despite exemplary work, she faced repeated challenges that appear to exceed normal academic rigor. This has prompted a full departmental review. Aisha felt a rush of adrenaline. Every late-night lab session, every hidden note, every video recording Maya had collected. Everything was now part of the official record. Dr. Reynolds turned to Caldwell. Professor, we request your explanation regarding these inconsistencies. Caldwell's voice was calm, but his tone carried a defensive edge. I maintain that my evaluations were professional. Any perceived bias is unintentional. I have always adhered to departmental standards. Dr. Reynolds leaned forward. And yet the documentation shows a pattern. Selective scrutiny, repeated challenges disproportionate to student performance, and notes suggesting warnings to peers about following Miss Thompson. Caldwell faltered. For a moment, the confident mask cracked. That was guidance, not exclusion. Faculty members murmured among themselves. The weight of evidence was undeniable. Dr. Reynolds opened a folder of additional documentation. Here are recordings, submissions, and corroborations from other students and faculty. The evidence clearly demonstrates that Miss Thompson was subjected to undue pressure and subtle intimidation. Aisha held her breath as the room processed the files. She could see Caldwell's eyes narrowing, scanning the papers, the faces, the truth. Finally, Dr. Reynolds said firmly, this behavior cannot continue. There will be an official review of faculty conduct. Steps will be taken to prevent recurrence, including possible disciplinary action. Caldwell said nothing. He simply collected his papers slowly, a silent acknowledgement of the shift in authority. The room relaxed slightly. Students who had been hesitant now looked at Aisha with admiration, respect, and a quiet relief. Daniel whispered, It's done. They can't hide it now. Maya added, The evidence is all here. It's official. No one can twist it anymore. Aisha exhaled. The weight on her chest felt lighter, though still tempered by exhaustion. Dr. Reynolds concluded, Miss Thompson, your work and resilience have set a new standard. The department recognizes your contributions and will ensure equitable treatment moving forward. Congratulations. Applause filled the room. It wasn't loud, but it was firm. Honest. Triumphant. Caldwell collected his belongings and left quietly. His influence remained, but his unchecked authority had been exposed. Outside the conference room, students crowded around Aisha. You did it, one whispered. Thank you for paving the way, another said softly. Daniel grinned. You just rewrote the rules of the department. Aisha smiled, a mixture of relief and lingering tension. She knew the battle wasn't over completely, but a major victory had been achieved. Maya placed a hand on her shoulder. This is justice, even if it feels slow. Aisha nodded. It's not just for me. It's for everyone who's ever been silenced. Daniel added. And you proved that skill, resilience, and evidence are stronger than intimidation. Aisha's thoughts drifted back to the lab, to the late nights, the whispered warnings, the fear of being isolated. Every challenge had been a step toward this moment. For the first time, she allowed herself a small, quiet victory. Caldwell's reputation would now be scrutinized. The board had seen the truth. The department's internal policies would shift. And she, Aisha Thompson, had not only survived, but exposed injustice while maintaining her integrity. But she knew one thing clearly. The emotional cost had been high. The fear, the anxiety, the isolation, it was real. Yet in the end, resilience had triumphed. And while the fight for equality and justice was far from over, Aisha had become a symbol, proof that perseverance and courage could shine through even the darkest systems. The sun shone brighter as she walked across campus that afternoon. Her steps were steady, her gaze forward. The battle was won, the truth was revealed, and the impact would ripple far beyond her own story. The campus felt different after the board meeting. Students no longer avoided Aisha's gaze. Whispers followed her, but they weren't the judgmental murmurs of before. They were curious, respectful, even admiring. Daniel caught up with her as she left the lab. "Feels different, huh?" Aisha nodded, letting out a slow breath. "It does. But I know Caldwell isn't done. His influence lingers." Maya joined them, laptop in hand. "Some faculty are still uneasy, but the review committee is in place. No one can bend the rules without scrutiny now." Aisha smiled faintly. "That's something." In the cafeteria, students approached quietly. A few thanked her for standing up. Some confessed they had been scared to ask questions in class, but her persistence made it easier. Even small gestures mattered. One student handed her a coffee with a shy smile. Another offered a note. "Your work inspired me to keep going." "Thank you." Aisha felt a warmth she hadn't expected. Recognition, yes, but more than that, she had made a space safer for others. Daniel leaned closer. "You know, most people never get the chance to challenge authority like this." "I didn't choose to," she admitted. "It just happened. But I couldn't ignore it." Maya smiled. "You made a difference. That's rare." Later that afternoon, Aisha walked past Caldwell's office. The door was closed, papers neatly stacked on the desk. She paused. It was strange, he was still a figure of authority, but the weight of truth hung over him now. The subtle intimidation, the whispered warnings, the bias, they had been exposed. Caldwell looked up briefly as she passed. His expression was unreadable. There was no anger, no smirk, only the quiet acknowledgement of a challenge he could no longer control. Aisha kept walking, letting the moment settle. She had faced the pressure, the scrutiny, and the subtle attempts to break her. She had survived, and more than that, she had changed the system. That evening, she returned to the lab to check her project one last time. The lines of code scrolled smoothly across the screen, simulations running flawlessly. She smiled faintly. Daniel and Maya were already there. "Quiet moment before chaos returns?" Daniel asked. "Something like that," Aisha said. She closed her laptop slowly, letting herself breathe. Maya added, "You should be proud. Not just of the project, but of how you handled everything." Aisha nodded. "It's been exhausting. But necessary." Daniel grinned. "And now you're officially a role model. Everyone knows your name." Aisha shook her head softly. "I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because it was the right thing to do." Maya leaned back. "That's what makes it meaningful." A quiet moment settled over the lab. The hum of computers continued, but the tension had eased. Later, the news spread across the department. Faculty discussed changes in mentorship practices. Students began speaking more freely in class. Policies were being updated to prevent selective intimidation. The ripple effect of her perseverance was already visible. That night, Aisha sat alone in her dorm room reflecting. She thought of the late nights, the whispered warnings, the pressure from Caldwell, and the isolation she had endured. It had left scars, yes. Anxiety, sleepless nights, constant self-doubt, but also resilience, clarity, and strength. She realized something important. Winning wasn't just about grades or rankings. It was about truth, integrity, and courage. The emotional cost had been high, but the reward, a shift in the system, was worth it. Her phone buzzed. A new message from Daniel. "Dinner tomorrow? Celebrate quietly." Aisha smiled. "Yes." She typed back quickly. The next morning, she walked across campus, sunlight warming her face. She knew the struggle for equality and fairness was ongoing. But for now, she had made a lasting impact. Her story wasn't just her own anymore. It belonged to every student who had felt silenced, every individual who had faced subtle bias or intimidation. And as she looked around at the campus, the labs, the lecture halls, the students quietly observing and learning, she understood change wasn't instant. But it was real, because standing up, even when the odds were stacked against her, had sparked something larger than herself. Something enduring. Something that couldn't be erased. The aftermath was quiet, but it was powerful. And Aisha Thompson had emerged not only victorious, but transformed. The day the department released its official statement, the campus seemed to hold its breath. Emails from the chair, Dr. Reynolds, had gone out that morning. All faculty and students were to receive a formal notice of policy changes and review outcomes. Aisha opened her inbox slowly. Subject: Department Review Outcomes, effective immediately. Her eyes scanned the text. After a thorough review of faculty practices and student experiences, it has been determined that certain supervisory actions were inappropriate and created inequitable conditions for students. Effective immediately, all faculty are required to adhere to updated mentorship guidelines. Any deviation will result in disciplinary action. Professor Caldwell will undergo a formal performance review. Miss Aisha Thompson's work has been recognized for excellence and integrity. Her contributions have set a new standard for the department. A rush of relief surged through her. But it was tempered by the memory of the months of tension, the late nights, the whispered warnings, and the quiet fear that had weighed on her shoulders. Daniel leaned over her desk, eyes wide. "Did you read that?" "Yes," she said softly. "It's finally official." Maya smiled. "Not just official. Public. Transparent. This changes the entire culture." Outside, the campus felt brighter, almost alive with energy. Students exchanged congratulations quietly, carefully. Some offered smiles and nods. Others simply observed, knowing that the subtle systems of intimidation had finally been challenged. A week later, the formal faculty review meeting took place. Caldwell was present, seated before a panel of senior professors. Aisha wasn't there, but she knew the evidence was overwhelming. Recordings, documentation, peer testimonies. Every late-night lab session, every whispered bias, every unfair grading decision, had been catalogued meticulously. The review was swift. Caldwell's previously untouchable reputation had been eroded by facts, evidence, and the courage of those who had come forward. By the end of the month, the department announced the outcomes. Caldwell received formal reprimands and mandatory retraining in mentorship and bias awareness. Policies were updated to ensure transparency in grading, project assignments, and student mentorship. Students previously discouraged from advanced labs were offered renewed opportunities. Aisha walked into the lab that afternoon, Daniel and Maya by her side. "The system actually worked," Daniel said quietly. "I didn't think it could happen." "It did," Aisha replied. "Because we documented everything. Because we didn't let fear silence us." Maya nodded. "And because you were relentless." Aisha smiled faintly. "It wasn't just me. It was all of us." Students who had avoided her before now approached openly. One said, "Thank you. You made it easier to speak up." Another whispered, "You showed us what's possible when someone refuses to back down." The validation was quiet but profound. Even as the triumph settled, Aisha felt the lingering weight of emotional cost. The anxiety, the sleepless nights, the subtle scars of months under scrutiny. But alongside it was resilience, clarity, and an undeniable sense of justice. The department had changed. Caldwell's unchecked influence had been curtailed. Students were safer, mentorship practices transparent, and the culture shifted, slowly but irreversibly. Daniel grinned. "You did more than earn recognition. You rewrote the rules." "I didn't do it for recognition," Aisha said. "I did it because it was the right thing." Maya placed a hand on her shoulder. "And the right thing has consequences far beyond grades or rankings. You've changed lives." Across the campus, students began sharing stories quietly among themselves. The ripple effect of courage and truth was spreading. Aisha looked around the lab, the desks lined with computers and books. Each corner reminded her of the late nights, the silent calculations, the strategy sessions, and the quiet support of Daniel and Maya. She realized something. Justice wasn't instant. It wasn't always dramatic. Sometimes it was slow, methodical, cumulative. But it was real. The department statement made it visible. The review panel made it official. The student's acknowledgement made it personal. Aisha exhaled, feeling a tension that had been present for months finally lift. She wasn't just a student who had survived scrutiny. She was someone who had exposed bias, challenged authority, and changed a system. The journey had been exhausting, emotionally taxing, traumatic in moments, but justice had been served. And while the scars of the struggle remained, they were now marks of resilience. Proof that courage, integrity, and relentless dedication could confront unfairness, even in the face of authority, and prevail. As the sun set over the campus, Aisha, Daniel, and Maya stepped out together. "Ready for a break?" Daniel asked. Aisha laughed softly. "More than ready." Maya grinned. "You earned it." Quietly but fully. Aisha looked back at the building, the classrooms, the labs. The halls that had once echoed with tension now felt open, illuminated by truth. And she knew with quiet certainty. The system had been tested, the bias exposed, and justice, long overdue, had finally been served. For the first time in months, Aisha Thompson felt not just relief but peace. The story was over, but the impact would endure.